Every war you have ever supported was sold to you, not explained, not justified, sold, like a product on a shelf with better packaging and a scarier label. The same techniques that sold you Iraq, sold you Libya, sold you Syria. Different flags, different villains, same advertising agency. And the terrifying part, it works every single time. They show you a crying child on television, and suddenly a nation of skeptics becomes a nation of hawks overnight. Sold every time. The playbook hasn't changed in over 100 years. From the sinking of the Lusitania to weapons of mass destruction, the formula is identical. Manufacture outrage, demonize the enemy, silence the skeptics. And by the time the truth comes out, the bombs have already fallen and the contracts have already been signed. Today, we're going to dismantle this playbook piece by piece. And once you see it, you will never unsee it again. There is a formula, and it has been documented, studied, and exposed by scholars, journalists, and even former government officials. Yet somehow it keeps working. The formula has 5 stages. 1. Create a villain. 2. Manufacture atrocity stories. 3. Control the information flow. 4. Wrap it in patriotism. 5. Silence all dissent. Every single modern conflict follows this exact sequence. It doesn't matter if we are talking about World War I, Vietnam, the Gulf War, or the War on Terror. The ingredients change. The recipe does not. As the political theorist Harold Laswell wrote back in 1927, the propagandist's purpose is to make one set of people forget that certain other sets of people are human. That was almost 100 years ago, and the machinery he described has only gotten more sophisticated. What used to take months of newspaper editorials can now be accomplished in a single news cycle with the right footage, the right framing, and the right emotional trigger. But understanding the formula is only the beginning, because the first step in the playbook is the most powerful one of all. October 1990. A 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl, identified only as Nayara, testified before the United States Congressional Human Rights Caucus. Tears streaming down her face, she described Iraqi soldiers pulling babies from incubators in a Kuwaiti hospital and leaving them on the cold floor to die. The testimony was broadcast everywhere. It changed everything. Senators sided it. The president sided it. Public opinion shifted overnight from opposition to support for military intervention. There was just one problem. It was a lie. Nayara was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States. Her testimony was coached by the American public relations firm Hill and Knowlton, which had been paid over $10 million by the Kuwaiti government. Fabricated, the incubator story was never verified. But by the time journalists exposed the deception, the war had already happened. This is not ancient history. This is the template. If this is opening your eyes to the pattern, hit like and subscribe to keep exposing what they hide. Because the incubator story was not an exception. It was standard procedure, and the next stage of the playbook makes it even harder to detect. If you control what journalists see, you control what the public knows. It is that simple, and the military figured this out a long time ago. During the Vietnam War, journalists roamed freely. They filmed burning villages. They showed body bags. They captured the famous photograph of a girl running from napalm. And what happened? Public turned against war. The public turned against the war. The government learned a devastating lesson, not that the war was wrong, but that the coverage was too honest, so they changed the rules. By the time the Gulf War arrived in 1991, the Pentagon had perfected a new system: embedded journalism. Reporters were assigned to military units, transported in military vehicles, fed military food, and shown military-approved angles. As veteran journalist Chris Hedges observed, in every war zone I covered, the weights on the scales of justice were always tilted in favor of the occupying power. The journalist becomes part of the machine. They develop loyalty to the soldiers around them. They see the war from one perspective only, and the public receives not reporting, but narration. A carefully directed story where the good guys always wear your flag, but controlling the messenger is only half the battle. The real genius is controlling the message itself. Here is how they turn a question of geopolitics into a question of loyalty. You wrap the war in a flag. Suddenly, opposing the war does not mean you oppose the policy. It means you oppose the troops. It means you oppose your country. It means you are a traitor. Patriotism becomes the shield that protects every lie from scrutiny. After September 11th, the phrase "support our troops" became the most powerful rhetorical weapon in America. Not because anyone opposed the actual troops, but because the phrase was weaponized to shut down all debate about the war itself. Flag plus shield equals silence. Phil Donahue, one of the most popular talk show hosts in American television history, was fired from MSNBC in 2003, not because of low ratings. An internal memo later revealed the network was worried he would become a home for the anti-war agenda during a time of patriotic fervor. They fired him for asking questions. When asking questions becomes dangerous, you are no longer in a democracy. You are in a marketing campaign, and the product being sold has a body count. But the playbook has another trick, one that makes the whole machine run on its own. Fear is the most efficient currency in politics. A frightened population does not ask questions. It demands protection, and whoever promises that protection gets a blank check. Remember the color-coded terror threat system: green, blue, yellow, orange, red. Fear sells wars. It sat on every news broadcast for years, a constant visual reminder that danger was everywhere, and only the government stood between you and destruction. Noam Chomsky called it the politics of fear, and he documented how governments throughout history have used manufactured threats to consolidate power. The general population doesn't know what's happening, and it doesn't even know that it doesn't know. The weapons of mass destruction narrative is perhaps the most devastating example. Colin Powell held up a vial at the United Nations and told the world that Iraq possessed biological weapons capable of mass casualties. Deception. It was compelling, it was authoritative, and it was completely false. No weapons were ever found, but 4,000 American soldiers died. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians died, and the companies that built the bombs, the drones, and the bases made record profits. Which brings us to the engine that keeps this playbook running decade after decade. Follow the money. It is the oldest investigative principle and the one most ignored when drums of war start beating. In the fiscal year 2023, the United States spent over $800 billion on defense. That money went somewhere. Every bomb dropped is a purchase order, and every war is a revenue stream. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, Northrop Grumman. These are not just defense companies. They are among the most profitable corporations on Earth, and their stock prices move in direct correlation with global instability. When tensions rise, their shares rise. When peace breaks out, their shares fall. Think about that incentive structure for a moment. Bombs equal money equals growth. President Eisenhower warned about this in his farewell address in 1961. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. That was a 5-star general and a 2-term president telling you that the machine he helped build was becoming a threat to democracy itself. 60 years later, the military-industrial complex is not a conspiracy theory. It is a line item in the federal budget. But the money trail only tells part of the story, because there is a quieter machine working behind the scenes. Before a war is fought on the battlefield, it is fought in policy papers. Think tanks with respectable names and prestigious addresses in Washington produce reports that frame every conflict in terms of national security and strategic interest. Policy papers start wars. These are not neutral academic institutions. Many receive funding directly from defense contractors. The same companies that profit from war fund the organizations that recommend war. And then those recommendations become policy. The Project for the New American Century published a report in September 2000, one full year before the September 11th attacks, calling for a dramatic increase in military spending and regime change in Iraq. The report literally stated that the transformation they sought would be slow, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor. 1 year later, they got their catalyzing event. And every policy recommendation in that document was implemented within 36 months. The war was written before the reason was found. These think tanks rotate their personnel into government positions. The same person writes the policy paper, then joins the administration, then implements the policy they wrote. It is a closed loop, And it leads directly to the next stage of the playbook, the one that makes sure nobody asks the right questions. Every playbook needs a way to neutralize our position, and the war machine has perfected this into an art form. If you question the official narrative before the war, you are naive. During the war, you are unpatriotic. After the war, when the lies are exposed, they tell you it is time to move on and look forward. 1. Before war, you are naive. 2. During war, you are a traitor. 3. After war, time to move on. There is never an appropriate moment to hold anyone accountable. The journalists who questioned weapons of mass destruction were marginalized. Phil Donahue was fired. The Dixie Chicks were blacklisted for criticizing the president at a concert. Careers were destroyed for asking the questions that turned out to be right. And the people who lied. Colin Powell called his UN presentation a permanent blot on his record, but he was never prosecuted. The intelligence officials who cherry-picked evidence were never charged. The media executives who amplified the lies without verification were never held accountable. As George Orwell wrote decades before any of this, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. The suppression of dissent is not a side effect of the playbook. It is a central feature, and it is connected to something even more insidious happening right now. The playbook has gone digital, and it is more powerful than ever. In the age of social media, you do not need to control a handful of newspapers and television networks. You need to control the algorithm. Algorithm controls everything. Emotional content spreads faster than factual content. Outrage generates more engagement than nuance. And platforms are designed to maximize engagement above all else. So the most inflammatory, the most frightening, the most anger-inducing version of any story rises to the top automatically. The war machine does not even need to push propaganda anymore. Automated. It just needs to feed the right story into a system already designed to amplify fear and outrage. During every recent conflict, fact-checkers have documented how images from previous wars or even from video games were shared as real footage and went viral before anyone could verify them. Your phone delivers the propaganda directly to your brain, and the speed of the cycle has compressed dramatically. What used to take months of newspaper campaigns can now be accomplished in 48 hours of trending hashtags and viral footage. By the time the debunking arrives, the emotional damage is done and the policy decisions have already been made. But here is the question nobody wants to face. If the playbook has been documented, exposed, and studied for over a century, why does it keep working? Because it targets something deeper than logic. It targets identity. When they wrap a war in your flag, questioning the war feels like questioning yourself. When they show you a suffering child, your empathy overrides your skepticism. When everyone around you supports the narrative, standing alone feels impossible. The playbook works because it hijacks your best instincts and weaponizes them. Your compassion, your patriotism, your desire to protect the innocent. These are noble impulses, and the war machine has learned to exploit every single one of them. But awareness is the antidote. Once you recognize the 5 stages, you cannot unsee them. Awareness is the antidote. Once you learn to ask who benefits before you ask who is evil, you become resistant to the manipulation. Not immune. Nobody is immune, but resistant. The pattern will appear again. A new villain, a new atrocity, a new wave of patriotic fervor. And when it does, you will have a choice. React on emotion or pause and ask the questions they do not want you to ask. Who profits? Who controls the information? And why is dissent being silenced? The playbook is not a secret. It has been written about by Chomsky, documented by Laswell, warned about by Eisenhower, and exposed by every independent journalist who dared to look behind the curtain. All war propaganda consists in making the enemy appear as monsters, and oneself as the very embodiment of righteousness. Atrocity propaganda, embedded journalism, patriotic framing, fear manufacturing, think tank pipelines, dissent suppression, digital amplification. These are not theories. They are documented techniques that have been used in every major conflict of the last century, and they will be used again. Same playbook every time. The only defense is an informed mind, a mind that pauses before reacting, a mind that follows the money before following the crowd, a mind that remembers the last lie before believing the next one. If you made it this far, comment manufactured consent to prove you see through the playbook now. Every government lies. The question is, what are they lying about?